So you kind of work on both sides of the equation
Yeah.
almost, right? What do you have themes that you've seen? Is anything cut across both investors as well as founders? What are the things that you've learned that we all want to lean into and hear about?
Well, one is confidence on both sides. I just spoke to an entrepreneur this morning who this was going to be more of a executive coaching of her. And her main goal was confidence. We talked about her lack of confidence, which is a theme I see across a lot of women entrepreneurs, but I also see it across women investors. We sometimes, as potential investors, we feel we have to go to a lot of classes, learn everything, make sure we know how all the contracts will work, what the terms will mean, and then we might start looking at things to invest in. And it's not a male tendency to do that, right or wrong. And we do know that women tend to have better results, both as entrepreneurs, as investors. So it's not necessarily a flaw. It's just that confidence thing does hold us back on both sides at some times.
And if you were to think back on any sort of like, I predicted it and they won, or anything where you're like, oops, and did you have any learning from any of those? So what are the things that you think really make someone a great entrepreneur and someone really successful?
Yeah, I have to say I've been burned a few times by my own judgment on this, in both sides where wasn't that impressed. And then the company went on to do super well. And also many that I've invested in where the entrepreneur just did not turn out to be able to handle all the challenges that CEO role can. But I think in general, what I like to see is somebody who sees the future and the vision and is driving toward it, but can execute in the short term. So it's the long-term vision and strategy, but then the tactical impact. And too often we're more short-term oriented. The sole goal is raising money, or the sole goal is getting the app out the door, all important, but we have to see it, where is this going? So I use these two analogies. One is sports, the Wayne Gretzky quote that he skates to where the puck is going, not where it's been or where it is. And the other is that in chess, the master chess player sees all the moves ahead, not just the current move. Not unlike in Queen's Gambit, if you've seen that film, where she was envisioning all the moves through the whole game. Yeah. So you can really tell the ones who sort of have that long-term vision, can talk to you about what they're doing today and accomplishing, but are there. And that is one of the big differences.
So if you were to think about, how the whole capitalization life cycle, I know venture isn't right for everybody. What is your perspective on what do we need to capitalize women and people of color run companies so that they can employ lots of people, get great solutions to market, et cetera?
I think the toughest is the early stage before they've proven too much, because, as I was telling the entrepreneur this morning, once they're successful, they have revenue, they have traction, they have some investors, you'd be surprised at how many people pile on. Sure. And this is why we find in investing, so many people don't want to be the lead investor. They'll tell an entrepreneur that they will invest when they have so much more committed. People want to follow. It's that whole success breeds success. So where it is the early stage, where many women and people of color do not have the kinds of networks that are going to lend themselves to getting some early money and what we call smart money, or even family type money, friends and family money. And so they don't have those networks, and we can be those networks for them. And I think there's a lot of the scenarios. It doesn't have to be always the venture model where we're going to exit. That might come later, but in an early stage, it could be a modified loan. The company is not yet at a stage where they can apply for the SBA loan, which of course is the cheapest kind of loan as far as interest rates there is, because they don't have the track record, but you could provide loans. You could provide money toward a share of profits or a share of revenue over time for companies that might really not have exiting or selling their company as the medium or even long-term goal. So I think there's a lot of avenues for that, and it's just putting the money in. But importantly, also, it's the mentoring and coaching and subject matter expertise. When you're starting a company, you don't have all the skill sets that you need, and you can't hire them. So trying to attract people who can help you get the logistics problem solved, or help you get the manufacturing issue solved, that's super important, and sometimes more than the money.
So when I'm an entrepreneur starting a company and I know, out of the 100% stuff I need to get done, I can be an expert at 60 or 70% of it, right? It sounds to me like you're saying you don't necessarily always need to, it's not about hiring every single one of those. What are the alternatives to hiring?
Oh, a couple things. One is advisors, of course. And I'm actually a fan of trying to get advisors who will do it for free, who will agree to a strategy call once a month using their expertise, some introductions. But you can also pay for that. Generally, companies pay for it by giving up some modest part of equity. And in there, we always tell the entrepreneur, make sure, there's agreement on what you're going to get in return for giving up that valuable asset. And I think it's just a mutual agreement between the two. The other way is to join up with groups of investors, frankly, that have, such as you guys do, followers and investors that have skill sets in these areas and are willing to use them. One of the things I like is that you put a SWAT team if the entrepreneur so desires. She indicates, where she feels she needs the help, and you put a SWAT team together. And I think that can be very valuable. It's not a full-time job. And also sometimes if you hire somebody full-time, it's the wrong person at that point in time. It's very hard to find the strategic person at the right salary. So sometimes you hire too low and then you're not able to get that strategy work done. And then you don't want to hire someone who you really only need for 9 months and then fire them. That's not good either, which a lot of companies do that as well. And so I think advisors in a general sense of the word is the best way to do that.
Yeah, that bridge time is tough. So thinking about that, so there's I'm bootstrapping, I'm getting this company started. And then there comes a point when you really want to kick it up and start getting that company to grow. What are the key leadership skills that you need at those different stages?
I think it's the scrappy person at the beginning for sure. And the person who does not need a roadmap that they haven't created. I mean, they don't need someone else to hand them a roadmap. We do find that a lot of people have been brought up with a lot of structure in their lives, school, family, after school activities, and then they are less able to deal with a lack of structure. And so that's one thing, somebody who could be scrappy, but putting it all together and getting it to where it's working sometimes is not the same set of skills as someone who can keep it growing and operationally effective and efficient. It's a different skill set. I found that myself in my last few jobs where I was CEO of an organization that had gone through significant challenges. I liked the 24/7 for the first 18 months, 2 years, getting it together. And then once it was going, I didn't think I was the right person to think of the next new product to increase the revenue or the next new service or just to keep it going. So in those cases, I was able to take myself out of it. But oftentimes an entrepreneur feels trapped and the company is now at that point where they're not the right fit.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So if I'm a founder starting a company, do I need to plan for that? And kind of, how do I understand, like, okay, these are my skill sets are best suited for this stage. Once I get to this point, I want to make sure if I hand it off, I still win. I'm not being pushed out.
Right.
How do I think through that as a founder?
I do think it is good to anticipate that you would leave at some point, particularly if you're modeling out the company. And I see many entrepreneurs who are modeling out the company for the years ahead and what might happen. Now, do I believe everything's going to happen on those dates she's planned? Not exactly. But I think it's good to know yourself, sometimes harder than other times to know yourself and to think when you might be. So sometimes a good first step of that is you'll see a CEO hire a COO. And that is an indication that their interests lie in the funding of the company, perhaps, and the visionary and the speaking, and that they're looking for the COO to be driving the rest. And then there's a view that someday that could change and the principal might not need to be there that much. And we see this in some corporations where the founder, after maybe even 20 years, starts stepping away.